All right, so let's look at a scalar type function. And so I'm going to walk you through the code, and then we're going to go ahead and run it. And this actually is executed in a little bit different way than a table value function, which can be, be kind of confusing. That's why we'll do it here. All right, so as we see in the lecture, there's going to be an input parameter to this particular function, only one, and it's called source. And it's of the type n-varchar, which is a string type, and it's going to have a maximum length of 8 characters. And this function will return a single integer. Now, what the heck does this thing do? In essence, what it does is it tests some input values to see if they are of the correct type. If the type input to this function is correct, it'll return a 1. Else it'll return a 0, which means somebody input the wrong value. Okay, so let's look at it a little closer. So we're declaring a couple of local variables to use, one called @result, which is an integer, and one called @temp, which is just a temporary hold variable of type string, just the same length as the input variable. So we're going to set result equal to 0, and we always want to set variables to a known value before we use them in case there's ever something going wrong with it, or there's some garbage in there. We know exactly what its initial state was. And then we set temp, since it's a string, we set it to a blank string. Okay, so what's happening is we're going to take that input source, and we're going to use this, and if you've not seen this select type of select statement before, whenever we want to populate a variable in T-SQL, we use a select statement. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the value that's in source, which was passed in, I'm going to put it in this temporary variable. And what I'm doing is actually here using two built-in functions that we did not talk about in the lecture, are right trim and left trim. And so imagine that source came in and somebody, whoever typed in the source, hit the space bar either before or after typing in, and they put a space character in there. This will strip those out. R-trim will strip it off the back end of what was input, and L-trim will strip it off the beginning of what was input. And so that way we ensure that all we have is whatever they typed in and not junk. Okay. So what we're doing here is we're going to take demote and put it into if. And the whole scenario is, and it's a little bit complicated, but here's how it works. In our database, people are grouped by families, who lives in the same house, that type of thing. Well, every family, for federal reporting purposes, has to have a head of household. And that head of household may change. Kids may move out. Somebody may move out. And so whenever we're doing maintenance to do that type of thing, we have certain codes we use. In this case, one is demote, in other words, which means the head of household is no longer the head of household. Delete, they move somewhere else. Or this person that we're working with is moved to a new household. They moved and set up their own household. Okay, so those are the three values that are valid to have input here. And so if we have demote, we'll set result equal 1, which means success. Yes, this is a good value. Else if it's delete, take this person out of the household. We're going to set result equal to 1. Or new household, we're going to set a result equal to 1. If it's none of those three, we're going to set result equal to 0, and then we'll return result. Okay, and that's all there is to this stored, or this not stored procedure, but to this function. And really, this is only simplifying some validation that somebody would use when they're writing code in this database. So if they want to make sure a user inputs something correctly, they call action to take. And if it returned 1, okay, this is wonderful. We'll continue with whatever processing we're going to do. If it returns 0, then we go back to the user interface and say, hey, you put in a wrong value. Do it again. Okay, so that's essentially what this does. All right, so how do we execute this one? Well, I've already created it in the database, so you don't have to watch me type. And I've actually already written out the syntax for how this would be executed. It's a little bit different. It returns a type of integer, so we actually have to declare in the query window a variable to hold the result. In this case, the result we know is going to be an integer, and I just called it result. So declare @result integer is set equal to 0 because that's the initial state that I chose for it to be. So we're going to execute. So we have to use the keyword execute. Space at result equals action to take. Now notice here, it says at source equals test. I just threw something in there, okay? Now, if we look down here, we can see that the parameter, we actually go back here and look at it, is called at source. So when we actually input the value we want to test, we have to put it directly into the name of the variable in that parameter list called at source. If there were more than one parameter, then each one would have to be seeded individually. At source equals test. At next parameter equals 5, and so on and so forth. So you have to set all your parameters manually like that. Okay. So in this case, I put a bad value in, and I expect to return 0. In fact, I'll put something else up here. I'll put like a 5, because we know that's not even in the range of possibilities. So I'll go ahead, then I'll execute this. You see it returns 0 because test is not demote, delete, or new household. So let's just test the entire function, and we'll put in delete. And sure enough, it returns a 1. Okay, and so that's an example of how to use a scalar user-defined function.